I've consumed over 50 spiritual books in the last 3 years, trying to intellectualize my way out of suffering so much. But my body was aching and my mind was still anxious. It was only when I stopped reading or listening to all of these audiobooks and I started sweating through the practice of Ashtanga Yoga that the philosophy finally came alive. I spent years trying to build this perfect intellectual fortress to protect myself from my own scattered thoughts. And I thought that if I just understood all of these concepts about presence and peace and enlightenment, then my mind would finally shut up. But it didn't. In fact, the more that I consumed this kind of information, the more fragmented I felt in my day-to-day life. And if you've ever felt like there's this giant gap between what you know intellectually and how you feel physically at the end of the day, like you're an expert on the menu but you've never even quite tasted a single meal, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm Sushmita, but you can call me Sushi, and today we need to talk about the real reason why your mind feels like it is a browser with like 50 tabs open, and why the standard meditation advice or spiritual advice often makes it worse. We call it a lack of focus, or you just can't think straight, but that's not quite right. In fact, it's something deeper that is known as attention fragmentation. It's been well studied in the yoga philosophy, and this fragmentation is the root of so much of our suffering. It's that feeling of physically being there, like doing a yoga class and being in your body, but then mentally you're like scattered across different worries, planning your to-do list, memories coming up while you're in a pose. And it turns out you can't really think your way out of a problem that was created by thinking. I think Einstein said that. I'm not sure with all this misquotation. But in this video, I'm going to show you how the physical practice of Ashtanga unlocks something that the books and the videos and all of these resources don't quite get to. We're going to explore how this time-tested system of Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga isn't just a regular workout, it's almost like a reliable, steady container as a somatic tool that you can use when this kind of attention fragmentation occurs during your day. And sometimes it actually uses the same exact principles as modern trauma therapy, and it heals this fragmentation at the root. This video is specifically for you if you don't have a somatic way to process the stress and you've been living entirely from the neck up. So watch till the very end because the last one is really, really important. And let's dive right in. We live in an economy that mines our attention for profit. And it goes beyond just distraction. When we talk about complex trauma or CPTSD in psychotherapy, one of the core symptoms is the sense of fragmentation that we feel. It's a defense mechanism. And so when the present moment becomes too overwhelming or too painful, or even just boring and you don't know what to do and you don't have your phone, the mind kind of splits off. We dissociate, we check out, and you don't need like capital T, big trauma, childhood wounds to experience this. If you have a busy mind, and I'm sure you do if you're watching this video, you're likely to do this kind of micro-dissociation hundreds of times each and every day. You're washing the dishes, but then you're arguing with your partner in your head. You're practicing yoga, but then you're planning your day and you're like doing other things while you're in the shape. This is fragmentation, and it exhausts you more than 100 chaturangas ever will. And for the longest time, I tried to fix this with like mindset work and reading about it. I read Kant, I read Jung, I even have a degree in Western philosophy, and I tried to convince myself that I can be calm and tell myself to be calm whenever something upset me. And so when you try and solve this fragmentation from the intellect, you're using the very tool that is causing the problem to kind of solve the problem. But sometimes you're just adding more noise to the noise. And Alan Watts, one of my favorite writers and philosophers, says it's like kind of like smoothing rough water with a flat iron. You'll just end up creating more waves in the ocean. And after that, I realized that I should stop consuming so much information when I'm doing the dishes, when I'm going out. I just should stop consuming so much information because it was only making me feel more miserable, but with a little bit of understanding about why I'm miserable. So it wasn't actually fixing the problem. And I decided that I needed to go back to my yogic roots, the thing that I always knew, and bypass the intellect entirely in order to fix this. So the mind can convince you that you're working on yourself just because you're going for a walk, or you're listening to an audiobook, or you're like learning about all of these different spiritual concepts. But the body keeps the score, and the body does not lie. You've heard this 1,000 times, but if your shoulders are creeping up towards your ears, or your breath is shallow and you're just hardly breathing, you're not at peace. You're at war with your own nervous system. And this is the thing that actually determines everything else. And so we have to address the fragmentation at the root where it lives in our nervous system. So how do we heal this fragmentation? This is where the specific mechanics of Ashtanga Yoga come in. And I don't mean just light stretching. I mean the rigorous, sweaty discipline of the Ashtanga Vinyasa practice. Many modes of psychotherapy that deal with this kind of complex trauma basically work on the principle of bringing you back into your body safely into the present moment instead of staying in that past memory or that future fear. And Ashtanga does this through something called the Tristhana method. So the Tristhana is a three-pillared approach. We've got the breath, we've got the posture, and the gaze. Think of it like this. Your mind is like a wild animal that's running around in a field. And if you just ask it to nicely sit down, it's going to probably attack you. So you need a fence and you need to stand outside the fence. So the first side of this container is the 𝐤𝐸 breath. Now this is the loud rhythmic breath that gives your mind an auditory anchor throughout the practice. You can't really ignore it. Now the second is the posture or the asana. And so when you're holding a pose like Navasana, which is boat pose, or you're like binding in Marichasana, the physical sensation is so intense that you literally don't have the bandwidth to worry about that Instagram post or like any other superfluous thoughts that are running through your mind. And it was really brutal when I started practicing Ashtanga. My muscles were so shaky and I was sweating buckets, but I didn't think about anything else for that hour on the mat. I wasn't just like doing it, I was really being present in my body. I was surviving and it was so demanding that it kind of unified my entire attention. And the third wall of this container, and this is maybe the most important one, is the drishti. The drishti means a focused gaze. And so in every single pose, there's a specific place in which you have to look. This is the tip of the nose, the thumb, the navel, and we are given these prescribed locations. Why? Because wherever the eyes go, our attention also follows. And so by locking the eyes on a single point, you physically stop the mind from scanning the room for danger, doing all of these different things. The last wall of the container is our energetic locks or our bandhas, and this kind of creates this entire somatic container for yourself. And so it forces those scattered fragments of your attention to come back home to the body, to the present moment. I remember the distinct moment where I was practicing for the first time and I was like really frustrated and I was angry at how hard it was because I thought I was good at yoga already. And suddenly the sweat started dripping onto the mat, my breath took over as I was like moving so quickly, and my mind just kind of stopped moving to the next thing. It didn't stop thinking, of course it was trying to figure it out, but it stopped fragmenting and it became single pointed, like laser focused on the movements that I was doing. And this is the essence of it. This is it. We use the body to trap the mind into the present moment, and we don't just ask the mind to be quiet because we understood some spiritual concepts. We give it a specific job to do, and that it has to focus on the job if we want to survive the class. And so Ashtanga is a really intelligent way for us to do this kind of somatic container for ourselves. And if we do it over a lifetime, it can be very inexpensive and very easily accessible. But here's where a lot of people get stuck. They get the physical discipline, they enjoy it, but then they somehow become rigid around it and they become gymnastic Ashtanga yogis. But to truly heal the fragmentation, we need to go one step further. We need to enter what's known as the whole brain state. Essentially, the structure of Ashtanga, the counting, the sequence, the alignment, all of that satisfies the left brain. It keeps the analytical mind busy. But if we stop there, then it just ends up being calisthenics or a workout or anything that you can do in a gym. We need to bring the right brain, the emotional, the intuitive, the feeling brain into our practice. And we do this through bhakti or through devotion. Now, I know some of you may not be religious, and I'm not asking you to become religious in order to practice yoga, But if we want to completely eliminate thoughts, which is a very advanced stage of samadhi, the goal of yoga, then we have to start by just directing them and channelizing them. And the highest place that you can direct them to is God, the universe, love, your highest self, whatever word that you want to use and replace that with, you need to be able to direct your thoughts to that goal. And so when you perform these intense physical actions, but with an attitude of surrender, with an attitude of love, something magical starts to happen in your brain. You're using the left brain for the precision, the alignment, and all of those things, but the right brain comes and gets involved with the devotion. And this is where it starts to synchronize in yourself. This removes the fragmentation from the root because you aren't fighting yourself anymore. You aren't judging your hamstrings for being so tight every single time you go for a run and then do yoga afterwards, because that's also a fragmented thought, by the way. You're just offering up that tightness as a prayer and then readjusting your body, making sure that your alignment makes it easy for you to keep practicing. And so when you offer up that struggle to something higher, it somehow brings us back into a state of flow. It restores the reality of the present moment because you realize that this breath, this thing that I'm dealing with right now, in fact, that is the gift. That's what I have to work with today. And so when I started bringing bhakti into my practice and I decided, okay, I'm going to dedicate this to something bigger than my own ego, that anxiety, that chaos somehow just melted away and I entered what is known as the whole brain state. This is where your intention and your action become one and the same, and there's no gap. There's like pure congruence and there's no fragmentation. It's just you, your breath, and like surrendering something to the divine. And so here's my invitation to you today. Stop trying to police your thoughts when you're on the mat. Stop trying to build an intellectual dam against the river of your mind because it's going to be really, really hard. Sure, reading things and understanding is useful, but just get on your mat, sweat, breathe, lock your gaze, work with your bandhas, create that somatic container, and then fill that somatic container with thoughts of the divine. Direct these intense thoughts to focusing on something higher and then really making sure that you're aligning yourself to that thing. This is how you come back to reality. And if you've ever felt like there's this giant gap between what you know intellectually about all of this yoga stuff and how you actually feel physically in your body day to day, then there's a link in the description below to join my Yoga Mastery program. I know I'm shamelessly pitching you, but you've listened to this video all the way to the very end. And I promise you, you will feel a huge difference by following the exercises in the step-by-step curriculum and coming to the live classes and asking your questions. So use the link in the description below to set up a call with me. There's absolutely no pressure. If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel because it tells the algorithm to send you more of my videos when I make them. But as always, thank you so much for watching till the very end. I hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.